Welcome to the Relational Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Wes Thompson, joined by my co-host, Austin Hill. Today we're talking about grace and hardship, and we hope it's helpful. Thanks for listening. Hey, Austin.
Hey, Wes. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
It's been over a month since we last chatted, so it's good to be with you.
Yeah, agreed. Same here. It's happy. I'm glad to be here.
Time's flying. Summer's flying. Yeah, it's been a minute, so it's good to be with you. Today, I just want to talk about, I think when we talk about being in healthy relationships and struggling with our addictions and attachments, I think there's just a need for grace. I mean, Christian or not, the idea of grace, goodness towards those that don't deserve it. When we find ourselves in unwanted behavior, when we find ourselves in difficult situations, we need grace, and we want grace. It's interesting how when people wrong us, I often find this in myself, and it's frustrating. But sometimes it's a natural response, but you want justice, you want fairness, you want, when somebody does you wrong or you perceive they do you wrong, you want them to feel some level of pain even. But it's just interesting that when in our failure, in our struggle, we long for and need grace. And so today's going to be less of, I just want to throw there's a couple scripture texts, maybe a couple quotes, and just chat about them and just kind of have a little fireside discussion about what this means for us and what this might mean for others. So I'll throw one out there, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on if the passage brings anything up for you, but also just how you're thinking about this and processing this maybe in your own life right now. But I know Peter in 1 Peter 5:10 says, "And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you've suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast." It's an interesting passage. It kind of assumes we're going to go through some hard things. I think we tend to minimize our suffering sometimes. I mean, suffering can be as simple as having a relationship breakdown. Suffering can be as simple as struggling with behaviors you don't want to do and you keep doing them. Suffering can be really extreme. Losing someone you love most or a child. Suffering is it's any sort of intense loss that causes this immense pain. And it's interesting that Peter says, God, this God full of grace, how we have this place with him, we're called to him. And he gives us this beautiful picture of restoring us and making us strong and firm and steadfast, which I think is something we forget. It's such a good reminder, but it also acknowledges the reality of suffering and hardship in this life, that things aren't going to be easy and perfect. So I don't know, I'll just pause there. Curious kind of what you're thinking or feeling right now.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Grace is one of those sticky, difficult topics. So I think some of the things that go through my mind and how I guess hope to approach grace is the first one is grace is not the absence of pain, kind of like what you were talking about. It's the presence of God in pain, while we're in pain. It's God's presence while we're in pain. That's what grace feels like to me. So the pain doesn't go away, but it's it's a presence while you're going through pain. That's the first thing that came to mind. I think the other one is that I think we often use grace as like a tool and it's a strategic way to get through something instead of like a posture of this is how I do life. So grace isn't something that comes and goes. It's something that just should be a true thing about you. Um, so it's not a performative action of just like, oh, I have to show this person grace, or be forgiving. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to put up with this poor behavior, or I'm going to try. Another one would be, instead of just putting up with the bad behavior, it's like, I'm going to try to fix this bad behavior. That's what grace is. But I think if we look at how Christ did grace in his like day-to-day life when he was walking around, a lot of it was just presence. He was just with people while they were going through tough things. So for me, grace isn't like a thing you check off the list of like, this is what makes me a good Christian. What makes me a good Christian is I show grace when it's necessary. I think it is one of the things that sets us apart when grace is a posture we take in our everyday lives all the time. It's not a tool or a weapon, but it's like a posture of how we navigate life. Those are the first things that come to mind with grace.
Yeah, as you're talking, I really resonate with that. Particularly, you talked about like the performance or I think we go towards wanting, like we feel obligated to show grace to others. We live in a very activistic society. In other words, like even in religion, we believe in God, and then we start to do all these religious things. And I don't know about you, but I think where I struggle with grace is I grew up around the church, I want to be this, my temperament is like, I want to be a good person. I want to show other people kindness and grace and goodness. I want to be accepted. But I think what I've been reminded of lately is not new or really that profound, but I think it's what a lot of us struggle with, and that is I can't divorce the behavior from the relationship. And in other words, I'm trying to exude this behavior of being gracious, but I don't know that I can really do that the way that it was intended until I first receive God's grace to me. Which is what I mean by the relationship. It's like we come to, I don't know about you, but it's like I want to do all these things, and hopefully they're good, the behaviors. But like all of that, if I'm made in God's image, if I'm made in God's world, it's like all of that isn't really full. It's not really, there's no weight to it or power to it unless I'm first in relationship with God and receiving his grace. It's almost like his grace towards me, his love towards me, his goodness towards me is the fuel for me to be able to maybe show that to a degree to others. And I think if I'm too quick to do the behaviors sometimes before my heart's there. And that's what can be challenging, because then it does become performative. You were talking about just a performance. So really resonating with that part. I don't know. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah. No, so I think what's popped into my head was, I think there's this, it's a very Christian thing to say. And I think like we can't fully experience God's grace, or show it to other people. We can't show people grace until we've received grace. And a big part of me in the past would have been like, well, then that means all the grace that I've shown in the past to people was meaningless and worthless and a waste of time because I didn't do the right thing first. And so like all these things that I've done mean nothing. It's like a zero sum game, which goes completely contrary to my belief of that our God is a God of abundance, that he's not a God of scarcity. And so even my like poorly placed, even performative grace has a hint and a glimpse of God's grace in it. But I am missing it. So like people will experience God's grace through my attempts at trying to be a gracious person, even if I'm imperfect in that. So they get to experience that grace. That's like the gift God gave us imperfect peoples. We get to experience good things from imperfect people. But I am missing out from a more full, kind of like what you said earlier, this fullness of grace from God. I am missing out on it if I don't start working on accepting his grace. So it's not like a one or the other. It's like, well, I'm a gracious person. Well, not really, because you aren't perfectly accepting God's grace, so you don't get it. So it's almost like a building on itself. And so it's not like it's not a switch that you flip. It's a process of slowly getting more and more attuned and used to the idea of God's presence in my life. Makes me more fully, as I go through that, more fully accept and experience that grace more fully from God as I get better or more used to it. It becomes more normal. It is not a lightning bolt typically. Some people might do that in situations, but I rarely see it where there's like a lightning bolt on-off switch in my life where like, oh, all of a sudden I've got this down. Like every time I think in my faith, in my relationship with God, every time I feel like I've hit it's like, oh, this is the best. I've arrived. There's a whole nother layer to it that I'm unaware of. And grace is in that great experiencing God's grace, showing God's grace to others. It's layers. It's something that just builds on itself again and again. Just like working out, like we use that analogy a lot, it's a muscle that you can build. So when I say that I believe our God is a God of abundance, I mean that I think there is a unlimited amount of grace that he can show me and that I can show others. And so that means it's going to be building. It could be building forever while I'm here. It's not like I'm not going to run out of it.
It's good. Sam Alberry, who's a writer, who I really, he's written some good stuff, but he said this, this is just another thing to chew on, which I thought was really interesting. He says, I'm grateful to my friend Kathy Keller, who is married to Tim Keller. Kathy Keller, for reminding me that God doesn't give us hypothetical grace, but only actual grace. The point is that when we imagine all the worst case scenarios, we're imagining them without factoring in the presence and grace of God that would be there if they actually happened. And I find that so interesting. But he goes on, as Kathy wrote in an email once, God doesn't play that game. He doesn't inject hypothetical grace into your hypothetical nightmare situation so that you would know what it would actually feel like if you ever did end up in that situation. He only gives grace for our actual situation. Replaying these scenarios over and over in our mind is therefore not at all helpful and actually factors out what God would be doing were it actually to happen. What we're imaging is actually life in that situation without God's presence. Man, that's a powerful line. Better to find something else to fill our minds with. C.S. Lewis makes a similar point when he says, remember, one is given the strength to bear what happens, but not the 101 different things that might happen. This reminds me of Eckhart Tolle. I mean, he's writing from a Buddhist perspective, but his book, The Power of Now, talks about our mind as being a thing that plays tricks on us. In other words, when we ruminate about things that may or may not happen, he says we're literally envisioning a fictitious reality, and we're actually causing ourselves suffering. And I like how Alberry puts it in his conversation with Kathy Keller, where it's like, because I do this. I do this. I'm bad at this, and I've realized how much anxiety and fear it stirs up in me. But you like play these possible situations in your life happening, in the future. Typically for me, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this falls apart? What if this? And it's like, I really appreciate Kathy Keller's perspective about, it's like, God, you're imagining these things happening without God being there. And some of these things may or may not happen, but it's like, if one of them does, God's grace will meet you there specifically in that moment. And it's really interesting. When I read this, I hadn't thought of this that way, probably ever. And I love C.S. Lewis's quote. Just this idea, right? Remember, one is given the strength to bear what happens, but not the 101 different things that might happen. It just encourages me towards the very specific love of God towards us, and how wherever we actually find ourselves, God meets us there. And the ruminating and thinking about all the possible struggles, I forget often that God meets us in our specific struggle. So I don't know, how does that hit you in light of this conversation?
There's the reality. It's like, we need to, like, tomorrow will worry about itself. So let's just be focused on today as best we can. So instead of wasting our energy on something that could be, like, that was always something where I would, in my mind, if there was only two options, it's in the world, like, there's a good option or a bad, like, for what could happen. A bad thing could happen or a good thing could happen. It seemed like a lot of the time people would almost always go to the bad thing's going to happen. So I'm going to focus on that.
Worst case scenario.
Yeah. So for me, it was just like, what if a good thing happened? And that would often get interpreted as, I'm not going to think about the bad thing, or like, oh, I'm just not going to prepare for it or think about it or have a plan for if it does happen. It was just, if I'm going to focus my energy on something that hasn't happened, I'm going to focus on the good thing that could happen instead of the bad thing, because neither have happened yet, because it's not tomorrow, it's today. So why in the world should I give myself ulcers about something that isn't going, like, that's not happening currently? So it's like so if we're like planning a trip to drive somewhere, and an option is I could get in a car wreck, or I could have a good car trip. I'm just, tomorrow. It's like, well, man, I'm going to get in a car crash tomorrow. I'm just put all this energy into, I'm going to get in a car crash tomorrow. Or I'd be like, I can have a good trip tomorrow. Neither are real. But I chose to focus on the good thing that would happen. Now, like, that's just like a mindset, but neither of those, like, thinking about the future, focusing on the future, and then letting that control your day to day, isn't very productive. Or even, like, it seems not even always the best use of your time. It's I think what I heard you talking about is, when you're fully present, you're able to fully address what is in front of you, so what happens to you in the future, it's a big deal what happens to you in the future, but it's not as big of a deal as what's happening to you now, right now. How I am present with you now is more important than how I'm present with you in the future, because now is now. So that's why this being able to fully experience God's grace and His presence in that is so important, so that I can be fully here and enjoy the life that I'm actually going through right now, instead of freaking out about something that hasn't happened, may not happen. So it's grace as an identity, not as something, not as a tool. It's an identity thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think practically, like, one of the invitations for me is just God, since God being like, my grace I will give you exactly what you need today. And I think the invitation for me then is to trust that I'll give you a sufficient, I'll give you the grace you need for whatever you face in the future as well.
Mm. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that you're going to feel super strong all the time. That's why grace is God's presence in the pain. Like, feeling pain makes you feel like you're lacking something. Like when someone passes away, there is a pain, there is a hole that person that leaves you. So it doesn't go away like just, oh, I'm experiencing God's grace, so I no longer feel lonely, I no longer feel sad. That's not what grace is. Grace is God's presence in the pain. It doesn't make like, so I think we have this oftentimes like, oh, when I experience God's grace, I'll feel better. So if I'm still sad, when something sad happens, that means I'm not experiencing God's grace. Like, that's not true, which is what at all. There's a difference between feeling this sadness and pain completely alone and feeling sadness and pain with others. It still hurts, but God's giving us a gift of His presence and the presence of others.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's good. That's good. Isaiah 41:10, the writer says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." I think that's what we all want. I mean, when we're going through hardship, we're facing our personal demons and struggles. To believe that the God of the universe, that the God who made us and all that is, the encouragement to not fear, because God will strengthen us, He'll help us, He'll uphold us with His righteous right hand. I think that's what we need to be consistently reminded of. Essentially, we're not alone. We're not alone. Many of us, I think, have a problematic relationship with our parents to some degree. Just in the sense that they weren't perfect. No one's perfect. No parent's perfect. I'm not a perfect parent. But I think we always want, I think the beauty that we're made for this kind of parent-child relationship is we always want to kind of look over our shoulder and see that parental figure just looking at us saying, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." And when that relationship is broken, or maybe the parent's not there anymore, or whatever, it's like when that's not there, I think that longing is still there. And it's just, I see God saying He is that for all of us in this passage in Isaiah. Like, just look, I'm here. You're not alone. You're going to be okay. And I think when we lose sight of that, when we don't have that foundation, knowing that God's with us, we freak out. I do. And that leads to, often it leads to us pressing further into our self-preservation strategies, which we attach to. If we're not attached to God, then we attach to something. And oftentimes it doesn't go well, which then can lead to what people call addictions, to all sorts of stuff. So I think it's encouraging. Do not fear. I'm with you. Do not be dismayed. I'm your God. I'll strengthen you and help you. I'll uphold you with my righteous hand. Again, it's inferring that God's writing to somebody who's gone through something hard. It's not this picture that everything's going to be perfect all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's grace isn't grace shouldn't be used as a license to suffer. It doesn't look like we'll suffer well and say nothing. That's not what a life of grace, being a grace-filled person is. It's being a grace-filled person means that it can be activistic. And what I mean by that, you're actively working to be connected to other people. So it's being rooted in a relational life with others, because that's how we're bearing one another's burdens and getting through the pain is slowly over time. And so by going through the pain with others, we are giving them, ourselves and others, the opportunity to show that grace. Because grace isn't always fixing. It doesn't take away the pain, but it is an attitude in how we get through pain.
Yeah, that's really good. I'll read this last quote for today. Timothy Lane. He said, "We've been chosen from the mass of humanity to live in an intimate union with Christ. It's amazing even to be tolerated by God. It would be an honor simply to be invited to the wedding. It's beyond comprehension to be the beloved bride of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. When you understand this, you can't help but live life aware of the honor, privilege, and blessing that are yours. Yes, your job may bore you. Yes, you had hoped to do something more significant. Yes, you wish you could find a way out. But you do not go to work searching for fulfillment. It may give you a sense of dignity, but it does not define you. In Christ, you are full, joyful, and satisfied." And I think this speaks to a lot of things, but I think in the context of this conversation, it speaks to how we often feel dissatisfied in our struggle, and we try to find that satisfaction in substitutes when, if God is God, the only place we're going to find the satisfaction that we seek is in Him. Regardless. And to some that might sound negative, but to others it's like it puts us all on an even playing field, man.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter where you come from or what you do or how much money you make or where you live. We all have equal access to this God who loves us so much, and in whom is really the only place that we can find the peace that we seek. So I don't know, any closing thoughts as we think about God's grace in hard times?
Yeah, I think we conflate strength. Like grace is one of those things that highlights what I think genuine strength is, which is the ability, which is the courage to acknowledge that I am not enough and that I am missing something, and I need somebody's help to fill that gap when I am going through hardships. Like that takes it's not a giving up. It's a giving over to God. What is God's? Knowing that like I cannot complete myself by myself. I am not a fully like I'm not living my full life on my own. So it takes an amount of wisdom and humility to say I am not enough, not in a derogatory negative way, but in a realistic, pragmatic way. Like I am not enough. I can't do this on my own. I need someone else. So I'm asking for grace, being willing to receive that grace so that I can get through this hard time. Because when you're going through a hard time, you have to give yourself the grace to realize you're not going to be, at your best form. You're not going to respond the best. You're not going to have the energy. You're not going to have the decision-making process isn't going to be the same. So giving yourself the grace and acknowledging it doesn't mean like you're giving yourself an out to act like a jerk or to be like, be bad, like do something poorly, but it's acknowledging that like, I'm going to need a little bit of help. And what we're talking about here is like knowing that God can be that person to help you get through it, to find the people to help you get through it. That's something you need others. There is a strength to acknowledge your own weakness. And that's what asking for grace looks like, is acknowledging my own weakness and then being like, and then accepting the fact that if I'm acknowledging my weakness and I'm saying this to someone, I'm saying it to God, and he still loves me in spite of my weaknesses, almost because of them, because we need them. We need him to support and cover that gap.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Relational Recovery Podcast. We'll be back soon with a new conversation. We'll see you then.